The discipline of suffering, of great suffering. Do you not know that only this discipline has created all enhancements of man so far? What could you tell me, based on this quote alone, about its author? Would you venture that he himself experienced suffering, great suffering? Was he deeply concerned with intellectual history? Does the phrasing point to confidence, perhaps hubris? Does the word choice reveal an obsession with power and motivation? An idea can let slip some of who an author is, but is the reverse true? Can an author's identity teach us about the idea she creates? If you believe Nietzsche, the writer of this quote, the author reveals not just some, but everything about the idea. And so is born Perspectivism. As we're about to see, Perspectivism can crush entire academic fields. But was its power too much, even for its author? Can any ideas, even Nietzsche's own, hold under its immense weight? It's the late 1800s, and a German philosopher with severely declining health, whose work has met little support by his contemporaries, is about to take a sledgehammer to past philosophy. "Hold on to your mustache," says Nietzsche. "This will only take a sentence." Every great philosophy so far has been the personal confession of its author, a kind of involuntary and unconscious memoir. Ouch. Not only does he critique every great philosopher in history at the same time, he somehow manages to do it in a way that feels like a personal attack against each one of them. Also, not only is this an attack, it seems to be a promise. Is Nietzsche about to give us the first ever unbiased philosophy? Let's find out, but first we need some context, because Nietzsche's goal was not just to pick fights with past philosophers, he also wanted to undermine their most dearly held beliefs. Specifically, 3 of them, as he sets the stage for Perspectivism. Number 1, humans have free will. Nope, says Nietzsche, all our actions are determined by fate. Any apparent decision we make is a function of how we have been conditioned in the past. He says our thoughts, values, every yes, no, if, and but grow from us with the same inevitability as fruits born on the tree. Number 2, we can understand and evaluate the motives that cause us to act. Nope, says Nietzsche, there are too many unconscious factors at play in our decisions for us to claim to know the real motives behind an action. We can't evaluate the motives of others, or even ourselves, because we can't know them. All actions are essentially unknown. Number 3, humans are fundamentally similar in what is good for them. Nope, says Nietzsche, we're all dissimilar, to such an extent that we cannot broadly say what is good or bad for all people. He wants to apply this to morality, but first he gives the example of a healthy diet. Just because someone eats a certain way and is healthy does not mean that that way of eating is healthy for everyone. We're all unique. Reasonable enough? Now get ready for what might seem like a jarring leap. Likewise, says Nietzsche, we also cannot say what is morally right or wrong. It's specific to the individual. Whoa, says every major philosopher to date, that is not what we think. Nietzsche condemns any system of morality that takes itself for unconditional and addresses itself to all, so pretty much all of them. Nietzsche said that they all disparage or hurt the higher, rarer, privileged individuals in society. So they may be beneficial for low, common, poor people, but not for the higher, rarer, and privileged kind. But wait, where does Nietzsche fall, you might be asking? Is he a low, common, poor class? No. So these 3 fundamental beliefs are widely held and form the basis of the dominant beliefs about morality. Nietzsche comes in and says, no, I don't think so. Next, he proceeds to carefully and systematically argue against every past philosophical system of morality in a work covering the entirety of philosophical ideas to date, larger than all the writings of Plato, Aristotle, and Aquinas combined. Just kidding. That wasn't really Nietzsche's style. Nietzsche wasn't a fan of attempts to carefully reason to universal truth about anything. In fact, he believed that such rationality did not exist. All such apparent reasoning was a deceptive facade for what was really going on beneath the surface. Philosophers, like all people, were functions of unconscious drivers, their actions dictated by their environment. Here, we find the basis of Perspectivism. Remember the quote from earlier? Every great philosophy so far has been the personal confession of its author, and a kind of involuntary and unconscious memoir. Taken in context, it's as brilliant as it is sweepingly dismissive. Arguing against three principles has given Nietzsche the ammunition to write off all other great philosophies with one broad stroke. He has given himself a clean slate. So what does he do with it? Does he reveal the secret to escaping philosophy that is an unconscious personal confession? Well, that's for you to decide. Here's what Nietzsche does next. He outlines what seems to be his own system of values. He describes what he calls higher men. You may sometimes hear the term Superman used, but in his later work he sticks to the term higher men. Curious whether you're a part of higher humanity? There are 5 characteristics to evaluate. First, you should be solitary and only use others as a means to an end. This can make higher men unpopular. A higher man knows how to make enemies everywhere. He constantly contradicts the great majority. Second, you should have a long-term goal and unifying life project, and work at it persistently. The higher man has the ability to extend his will across great stretches of his life. Third, you should be resilient in your pursuit of health and have an understanding of what is good and healthy for you, including moderation of pleasure. Fourth, you should affirm your life unconditionally, including any suffering that you endure. This is exemplified in Nietzsche's famous doctrine of eternal recurrence, which says that one should affirm their life to such an extent that they would gladly relive its entirety again and again for eternity. Yikes. Finally, you should revere yourself. The noble human being, says Nietzsche, honors himself as one who is powerful. Time to recap. Nietzsche doesn't like the morals that are floating around. Christian, Kantian, European, utilitarian, they're all just perspectives that are pretending to be universally true. Once you see that free will doesn't exist, that we're all unaware of what motivates us, and that there's no one morality that's good for everyone, we can get rid of all that junk. Then, Nietzsche outlines a new system of values that reveres solitary people who are not accepted by society, working on unifying creative projects, are resilient in the face of poor health, affirm their own life unconditionally, and revere themselves. Alright, cool enough. But there's one question begging to be asked, isn't there? Nietzsche says all beliefs are just perspectives, and uses that to argue against other systems. Well, what happens if we apply the same critical lens to his own work? Let's find out. Nietzsche was born into a Lutheran family. His father was a Lutheran minister. He perceived the strong moral systems of his time to be revering weakness and humility in pursuit of happiness. But Nietzsche's life didn't conform to this system. He was not meek or humble. He had an incredible academic career, reaching high positions at a very young age. At the same time, suffering, rather than happiness, was the driving force in his life. He lost his father at a young age and had continual health problems throughout his life. Despite his brilliance, he was unappreciated during his time, and his work was controversial. As a result, he spent much of his life in solitude, struggling against pain and poor health, focusing on the creation of big, revolutionary ideas. Nevertheless, he was self-affirming and revered himself as among the highest men. Nietzsche's life and work seems to exemplify perspectivism as much as it uses it. His rejection of moral systems of his time seems connected to the fact that they did not fit his own life. And in the new system of values that he outlines, higher men are clearly based off of himself. So what should we make of this? Here, we stand on the precipice of an ongoing debate about Nietzsche's work. How should we understand its consistency, or lack thereof? If you're not a fan of Nietzsche, it might be easy to write off his idea as self-defeating. He dismisses other moralities because they're biased, then seems to create a morality that's even more biased, only this one is biased in his favor. That line of criticism may have validity, but that phrasing is an oversimplification. There's a concept in philosophy and academia more generally called generous reading. It means that we should always try to give a perspective every benefit of the doubt, especially when we're inclined to criticize it. Here's a more generous, more intriguing interpretation of Nietzsche. Quick disclaimer, we are well into the territory in which academics who study Nietzsche disagree. Actually, there's disagreement in most Nietzschean territory. Nevertheless, it's still valuable to think about these things for ourselves and even form our own opinions. Our more generous reading of Nietzsche begins by saying this: Nietzsche did not claim that all those past philosophies and moral systems were wrong per se. If he had, it would have conflicted with his idea that we cannot know universal truths. Everything is biased because of our perspective, remember? It might be more accurate to say that Nietzsche believed these moral systems were outdated, or at the very least, were not right for everyone. At some point, they were useful for a certain group of people, specifically the poor common majority. They might even still be useful for some people, but certainly not for higher men like Nietzsche. But hold on, Nietzsche criticized these moralities to no end, and when he posed his own value system, it was clearly framed as superior to others. So maybe Nietzsche escapes one contradiction by not claiming that moral systems are false just because they're based on an individual's perspective, but surely it's still a contradiction to frame all other moral systems as inferior to yours when they are no more based on biased perspective than yours is, right? Actually, I think it would be more of a contradiction to do the opposite. Nietzsche's framing is very consistent with perspectivism. Imagine if he had done the opposite. If he said, no moral system, including mine, is any better than any other. He would have been taking an apparently unbiased stance. He would have been positioning himself as the objective evaluator. He would have been a perfect counterexample to his own theory. Everything is from a perspective, except my objective evaluation. That would pose a contradiction that would itself need explanation. Instead, Nietzsche brazenly embraces perspectivism. He exemplifies it. He does not hide that his morality is a perspective, nor does he believe that it's meant for everyone. As he says, the well-being of the majority and the well-being of the few are opposite viewpoints of value. His is the morality of the high few. Perhaps commoners should hold an entirely different one. I should note that Nietzsche embracing perspectivism does not put it beyond criticism. Philosophers still debate problems that the belief itself runs into. Also, we did not consider critiques to the claims that Nietzsche made regarding free will, motives, and the universality of morals. They are less outlandish today than they were at the time, and Nietzsche can take a great deal of credit for that, but they are still very significant claims. Nevertheless, when I first read Nietzsche many years ago, this is what struck me. He goes all in. Nietzsche takes his beliefs to their logical conclusion. He fully embraces all of their implications. That's both admirable and rare. And on that note, here's the question that I'll leave you with. What is a belief that you hold, or that you see others holding, which is not lived in practice? And why do you think that's the case?